I think each individual was told what we'd tell a president today.
Yeah.
A huge download of world understanding that, that the human mind normally would break under. And so the strength to have the purity of body, the toxins out, to be mentally ready to take that, and then withdraw with that, and then bring that knowledge safely back to your culture, would have been a profound responsibility.
Absolutely. And we were discussing earlier that you've talked to Indigenous elders, and obviously, there was some talk about reactivating the site, all that sort of stuff. However, that you can't be initiated properly anyway because we put highways through, and there would be many steps before you arrived at this, as you say, the major site. And potentially these other stone rings we're talking about, you may have had to pass through those.
Exactly.
Before you got there.
When I asked an Aboriginal who took me to one site, I said, where we've seen what looks like ballast from ships that came from overseas, I asked him, how come if this is just ballast, if these are just stones that are at the bottom of rocks at the bottom of a ship to keep it stable and seaworthy and on a long distance voyage over the ocean, if that's all they function as, how come they seem to be carved? How come they seem to be like plinths? This sort of long stretched pyramidal shapes. And he said, well, it's the same reason why we might put a figurehead on a boat. It was sacred. Yeah. So even the ballast was in a sense, had undergone initiation. Even the ballast was the reverence for what was going to be dumped was sacred.
Well, I suppose if you, from wherever, and look, I think it's becoming clear that I know that potentially multiple cultures came here from around the globe to learn spiritual practices, for want of a better term. If you were coming from far away, you can almost see why. Okay, this is the boat that is going to take us here. This is the ballast. We must make sure we bless the boat. We bless the ballast.
Yeah.
Everything is. This is the journey to end all journeys.
Which points to the idea that the initiation, to get into the state of mind to be ready to be receptive, would have begun from at home.
Yeah.
Whether it's all the way from England or Egypt or wherever it might have been, whatever they would have called those places back then. Yeah. That to get into the mindset to receive the information, the reverence, and also self-reverence. Yeah. To think I'm worthy to receive the information, I think would have begun well before. So true, taking away 3 ways around here, locally would have intercepted the walk from the coast to the site and blocked initiation. But to me, it's sort of like where you have like a exponential graph where the importance of the initiation might increase
the closer you
get to the site. Yeah. But every point is important. Yeah. So if on the way here you got a cold, that might be enough to say, hey, because I know that when people go to sacred sites now, the idea I've been told from elders here that when you go to a site, you might have say a team of 20 who are going to go, but if one person's sick that day, the whole thing gets cancelled. Yeah, right. Because that's a sign. Yep. And that if something's done, say you hold a ceremony at a site and you wait, and then was it a good ceremony? Is it going to have a good outcome? Let's give it a year. Let's let the seasons pass and see what happens. Yeah. So so what we might see as inconsequential to their decision making would have been maybe quite profound. So would have been a highly selective process, and a lot of would have been asked to the initiate as much as the initiator.
And yours, and is there? You talked about the keystones before, and so in the documents there, Slater says, "Oh, there's a stone missing here. There's a stone missing there." Essentially, is he saying that would be the keystones to initiate the ceremony? Is that your interpretation?
So the keystones, I think, were code stones in a sense.
This unlocks this section.
This unlocks this section. Also tells you, so there were stones of different sizes. Some would not have been movable because they just would have been too big and wedged into the ground. Then there were smaller stones which would have told more intricate tales. And I think that Bora rings all around traditionally would have given you the story of life and death, that sort of sequence of understanding how to work in a community. And the keystone would have been a way where you place it on the ground, I'd say in the centre of the arrangement, or some particular location they would have known of, and by placing that keystone based on the angles and the shadows cast on that would direct them where to arrange, realign the scattered stones. Yeah. So you'd hold a ceremony, and then after the ceremony you could scatter a lot of the stones, and that was enough to deactivate it. Where if anyone else came who wasn't meant to learn, they wouldn't understand the message being imparted or the story being told. So the Keystone was important. I think what happened in 1840, because we know the Coringa stone is missing, which is meant to be one of the keystones.
Yep.
And the Coringa is, and I might be pronouncing it wrong, but there's different derivations of that around the country.
Of course, yeah.
But it's sacred stone, sometimes made out of wood or sometimes out of crystal. And that was meant to be missing. And I think what happened was the idea from the letters is that in 1840, cedar loggers came and interrupted our Aboriginals holding ceremony there.
Yes.
And the Aboriginal people had to run because they'd been fired at. But they would have heard that coming in quite a few days away. And so even though when the white people came and found Stonehenge pretty much the way it is, in situ, looking like a Stonehenge, some of the essential stones and the movements had been that you could actually carry away were carried away. So the Keystone were taken because it's thinking, well, the white man can't do anything with this if they actually don't know the pattern. They don't know the Keystone. Yeah,
that's fast. So interesting. I did want to ask about. You keep mentioning crystal. That's something that's completely new to me. That the Indigenous people traded in crystal and they use crystal. What's been your understanding about that?
Okay, so I knew, even though I didn't know much about history, as in I don't know too much about Aboriginal history. I don't know too much about any history, okay, despite maybe calling myself a historian and written books about it. Yeah. But I knew much earlier that one of the... Okay, before I go on, do you mind if I digress a little bit about the impact we had on Aboriginal culture?
Absolutely,
okay. Yeah. So say 150,000 years have existed here.
Yeah.
And people might say, okay, so where's the evidence of civilization as Westerners see it? I think one key that the Aboriginal people had that nailed them to survive was the fact that they adapted.
Yes.
They were constantly evolved with the land. If the land dictated that it was very good for them to be moving around because it's drier and they need to be more nomadic, they'd be more nomadic. When you had a few centuries where there's a lot more rainfall and a lot more green, then it made sense to build a village. So if we had come here one year, we would have seen maybe a lot of constructions. If we'd come here maybe at one millennia, we might have seen stone circled all around the country instead of just here. I think that we have ideas about what Aboriginal culture is.
Yes.
But, like we say, they like didgeridoos, there's spot paintings, there's certain things, spirit, legends and whatever. But there were certain taboos that were followed, and we know them. And we know one, for example, is words. So if, for example, my name was Shrub, when I died, you wouldn't, if there's anyone else called Shrub, you wouldn't call them Shrub. They'd have to change their name.
They have to change their name.
But not only that, but the word shrub for shrubs would be changed. So shrubs are no longer called shrubs. So the language in one village, one area, changed incrementally over time. So in theory, within 3 generations, they're actually not saying the same words to each other.
Right.
Okay. But so you've got local villages, who have languages for their particular trees and their particular fauna. Okay, a possum, whatever it is, they have a word for it. That you don't need to know that word in the other side of Australia, where you don't have that vegetation and that fauna. Yeah. So depending on where you are in Australia, assuming that the language never changed, assuming they didn't have that code where you changed the names of things and the language adapted with the environment, even if the language was never moved, you would still have a different language in Arnhem Land from Tasmania, because you wouldn't be calling it wombat or wombat, because there wouldn't be wombat in that location compared to another location. Yes. So the language was always changing, but you did have the sacred language. Certain things didn't change. Love didn't change. Death didn't change. Birth didn't change. Human contact, the way we are is our human condition. Yeah. And our senses of how we connect to the world. Those things are beyond language and they're shared universally. Yeah. And so they had the words for that. They had the symbols for that.
And seems to be and hold your thought, but it seems to be that there was a universal set of symbols globally, not just, you know what I mean? There seems to be a universal language.
Yeah, it's very well known where we see emulations of symbols, and we see copies of symbols right across the world, across the globe. So just to finish off what I'm trying to say about the Aboriginals. So, in a sense, it was an ever-changing, adapting thing, where their belief systems, their language, certain oral traditions would have been kept. These examples where Aboriginal people have said, okay, this fruit came from the north, and then they can track about 10,000 years and say, actually, if you look at the migration of that species, they're correct. Or there was a supernova. Yeah. And we actually go, well, actually 10,000 years ago there was. And that's interesting because of parallels to their myths. So certain legends
They're not legends. They're story.
Yeah, certain stories didn't change.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't matter in the sense where you got a couple of things confused, but as long as you said one man, one woman, or, you know, certain elements like the stones, there's certain stones that never moved and certain stones that moved. Certain things in their cultures never moved. But the rest of it did. The rest of it was liquid, constantly flowing.
Yeah.
So almost unrecognisably different may have been a series of maybe communal laws and ways to communicate and certain things within 100 years. But when white people came, we froze it solid. We took a snapshot, a Kodak of the people, and their continually changing, adapting ways froze. We froze it. So we froze it, and then we said, okay, let's carte blanche, say Aboriginals are like this. But everything we think Aboriginals are is what Aboriginals were in 1788.
Yeah.
And they weren't what they might have been in 1652.
Yeah.
Or what they could have been in 1918 if we had not been here.
Yeah.
So we need to understand that when we try to understand Aboriginal culture, we can only say how much we don't know.
Yeah, and look, that I can completely concur with what you're saying there, because obviously you, through your talk and your research, you've spurred me on as far as digging into Australia, and I've been deep down the rabbit hole of Australia, and the one thing I can say is that I never knew anything. You know, I spent nearly 10 years in Arnhem Land. I've been into Arnhem Land with the Indigenous people. I've sat around the fire. I was adopted into a tribe. Like, from the average person, I would have said I knew a fair amount about the Indigenous culture. I didn't know anything, you know, and trying to learn it and understand it has been fascinating. It's very sad because I'm beginning to understand what we lost. However, it was very complex. They were very advanced in their own way. And the other thing because one of the things that I've been researching is what we don't understand is that irregardless of the great cataclysm that happened 13,000 years ago that reset the entire planet, if you look at Randall Carlson's work, I've said this a few times, that there's like 17 times in the last 150,000 years where a reset button has been hit. But closer to home, like the last podcast I released was on a double impact that happened in the Gulf of Carpentaria just 1,500 years ago. You know, these things happen on a regular basis. So not only they would have disrupted everything again, you know.
Two things to say, which is interesting. We can mourn the loss of what was so profound that we no longer have our understanding, but what we do have is a sense of loss, which we possess.
Yes.
And that's one thing that's been universal. In all these reset buttons, the idea that people come out of it, a few survivors come out of it, you know, who are traumatized, who can only wonder at what was before, is a very human and natural, normal thing and part of the system, part of like the natural system of things.
Yeah.
So it's not alien to us to feel the sense of loss, but in a sense that actually shows that it hasn't been lost. The very fact is we miss it and wish it.
Yeah.
Means it's never went, in a sense. But I want to go back to crystals, because that was the original, what you originally asked about the crystals in this area. I knew, so when I had to preempt that, talk about how we have a changing landscape when it came to Aboriginal peoples. But I do know that in another part of Australia, when white people met them, one of the practices they observed was that the Aboriginal people, one particular area, and I don't know where, I forget where this was, but not here, but it was that they would get crystal quartz and they'd place it in the forehead of a male. So they basically get a sliver of crystal and they place it on the skin subdermally, where we would say our third eye is, that chakra or whatever.
Okay.
And that would enable them to do their X-ray paintings, apparently. So I'd already knew before I'd come to this area that quartz, which is what runs our computers, was deemed to be very desirable. But by the Aboriginal people at certain, like, you know, at least at one point, they knew it had some key to knowledge. So here they were known to trade in crystals with other tribes. And I know that some of the Stonehenges here, apart from the Stonehenge, were either made of crystal or decorated with crystals. And when so all stones are crystals, though. We've got to know that.
Yes, they are, yeah.
They're all crystals.
Yeah.
And it is interesting that, and when I say that you've got Crystal Castle here, which is, I don't know if you've been there, but it's very touristy.
Yeah.
But it has the world's largest collection of crystals. The idea of trading in crystals, we're still trading. It's just this area seems to want us to trade in crystals.
It's interesting how those echoes happen.
Yeah, it's interesting how these echoes happen. That we seem to be a place to do it. And if we I looked at the formation of the very large crystals, and most of them can happen in subterranean areas when you have a cave system that fills with water, and then and which is possible around this whole Mount Warning area, which is a 20-million-year-old volcano that's extinct. And so I don't think the crystals. When I first heard about the trade in crystals, I thought they might have had some ceremonial purpose, but I think the crystals might have had an educational purpose. I think they could have been like an iPad, their version of an iPad. Yeah.
And see, that's and obviously, crystals have taken on a woo-woo spiritual connotation now. However, people seem to forget, like you said, the first radios.
Crystal radio.
Any watch that says quartz, that's what powers your watch.
Yeah.
These things at the base of our technology is.
Yeah, crystals are just constantly oscillating.
Yeah,
they're constantly giving the yes, no, off and on signal. All crystals are.
And the story is that they were storage devices.
Yeah.
And I think the one that blew me away, because my mother dragged me to crystal groups since I was 8, and I've had an affinity with them for a long, long time. However, that one you showed at your talk was unbelievable. I'd never seen anything like that, and I've been looking at crystals for a very, very long time. And so that supposedly came from the site. That
it came near to the site. Yeah. It wasn't taken from the site, but it was taken close to the site. That's right.
Yeah.
That was I don't know if even taken Aboriginal person presented it to me. So he would argue that the crystal took him.
Okay. Yeah. Did you want to share what you saw with that crystal, or?
It displayed. He was shown to me, and it displayed. Okay, so firstly, when crystals come, it wasn't a very good crystal compared to what would have been there. It's very worn, for example. Yeah. Obviously, lots of hands have touched it. It's not the cleanest or clear.
It's not the clearest cut bit of quartz you've ever seen or anything else.
Well,
like that.
It just looks like it might have been, but it's been worn over the centuries.
Yeah.
It's been handled a lot. But given that it had a refractive nature to it.
Yes.
That when we shone lights on it, images appeared.
Yeah.
That had animation.
Right.
But because I don't have the crystal, I won't go too much into that.
Yeah.
But it seemed as if crystal works with light.
Yes.
And it seemed to be one way it allowed you to see its value was that you could read from it or use it to illuminate.
So essentially,
around
you saw it storing information. However,
I know it sounds odd, but basically so I'll explain it, but I can't. If you don't mind me, just explain something I can't prove.
Absolutely, yeah. And look, and this is something you've seen. However, we don't have it here.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Take it at face value.
Yeah, it's face value. Yeah. Just my observations, just my eyes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So just one sense out of one person.
Absolutely.
Okay. So rotating it, what it did is revealed a partial image of like a 3D landscape.
Right.
And it was an outdoor landscape. Mm-hmm. And when I moved the crystal, it slowly rotated in my hand and looked at what it was throwing from light hitting that onto the walls around me, that image changed to the same image but a slightly different angle and a slightly different progression of movement.
So it's almost like a panoramic.
It was like a panoramic animation, like a film.
Yeah.
That only played when you turned the crystal and held it up to an area where it could focus on the walls around it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose, look, in stepping away some sort of factual stuff and a little bit theoretical, if there was crystals within the Australian Stonehenge as they passed through the initiation ceremonies, as you say, these keystones, or they could have been made of crystal, or you'd refract light through them to reveal a part of the story. Well,
the thing is, you can imagine that, so it's night time, you're initiated, you've gone through the first circle, you're then taking the winding pathway to the final circle, the destination, or death, or rebirth, or whatever. And then you have some stones made out of crystal, some stones with crystals on them, if they were like anything like the other stones around here, stone circles. And then if you light it up with a torchlight, or and you hold it at a certain location, and so, as I said, when you rotated the crystal, it produced different images.
Yeah.
If you have a flame, even if you hold that flame still, by the movement of the flame, the rotating is done for you.
Yes.
So so around you would have been illuminated through the crystals around you, interweaving stories.
Yes.
That, it's sort of like the idea of reading 2 books at one time.
Yes.
You would have actually got, say, several volumes of information coming at you visually, and perhaps even with an audio as well.
Yeah.
These crystals make sound when struck. You've seen how stones have been struck, almost musical.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there would have been audio, like my talk, there would have been audio-visual accompaniment to the narrative.
That's I mean, obviously we are talking theoretically, however, not at the same time, because you can, as you say, crystals make sound, and from your point of view, you've seen one create visuals, and it's not out of the realm of possibility for that to happen. I mean, it speaks to the, and it's hard to say, like, you always want to say advanced level, and it is an advanced level that we don't understand of technically of technology, you know what I mean? Even just to put these stones in place and stuff like that,
Yeah, when I've looked at the complexity of the arrangement, and I've looked at the mathematics and I've correlated it with what scientists are doing today, it seems to me that the issue with the technology is not necessarily what's holding up the technology being understood isn't necessarily technology, the problems with the technology. It's problems with the people using the technology.
Yeah.
So scientists, who are brought up with, things are right or things are wrong, are now grasping with, a physical world, with physics, with quantum mechanics.
Quantum mechanics,
where things can be true and not true at the same time.
Yes, they can exist and not exist at the same time.
Yeah, or exist in 2 places and be the same object.
Yeah.
And they're dealing with that now. They're trying to wrap their heads around it now. Now, that would be magic a few hundred years ago.
Absolutely.
Like the television, like the computer. So what we perceive as magical would have I think is really to science, but it's science to a level that's a spiritual science, where you can accept yes and no simultaneously, yet still be rational.
Yeah, everything is anything and nothing at the same time.
It all has meaning but has no meaning. That sort of Zen-like sort of Tao sort of stuff starts to come out of it, which is why I'm interested in China's history, which I'll go into a little bit later on. But I think that we can say that humanity is told you're the friend, you're the enemy, you're the male, you're the female. We Europeans are very we have a dichotomy.
Yes,
we love
black or white.
Black or white. We love that. We love to separate things on a spectrum and say it's that or that. And
gives us comfort, I think.
Gives us comfort, gives us structure. Yeah. We have rules, and when we know what the rules are and they don't shift, we can get on with our lives. But everything has changed. The world's constantly changing. The rule was it's great to mind. Guess what? You can't do that all the time. Because the rules. Humanity is still an animal in a sense. We're still connected with nature. We're fluid. Yeah. We're fluid. And for us for technology to be fluid, we have to be more fluid, more accepting. So while we are caught up in paradigms that lock us into a binary system, and then, which is for what is binary system for us and rational to us is almost schizophrenic to another culture.
Absolutely,
because we're splitting our minds into 2 different things. Where we're constantly doing it every day. We find ourselves in conflict. Most of those conflicts we arrive at. How many times does someone say, do I go get I've got a pencil here, do I bother to look for the pencil sharpener? I know I have, or do I just grab a knife? So we're constantly adapting and making do with our technology and not using technology properly because we think we're moving smartly. But that may not be, but we may be in a sense almost autistic, almost obsessive compulsive disorder, caught up in
the ones and zeros of existence.
Ones and zeros, caught up in the idea that I do this because my dad did this, and we're very, we're not going to adapt. What I liked about Aboriginal people, and what sort of surprises me, is when I would look at towers, say in Mesopotamia, I'd look at a tower and I know that 3,000 years ago it was 10 metres tall, and now it's 8 metres tall. So after 3,000 years, it's only lost 2 metres, and I thought to myself, whoever built that tower said, you know what I think is right. And not only do I think it's right, it's so right that this tower should be here. It's right for me and my kids and my kids' kids and my kids' kids, forever. So it was chronological imperialism. We were okay to do that. And I sort of thought to myself, I didn't actually perceive Aborigines as wanting chronological imperialism. Yeah. Because why would they say, I'm right, and I'm so right that it's good enough for everyone, I'm going to build this church here that you're going to have to walk around or accept forever. But when I learn more about Stonehenge and I see how there were certain stones which I think certain tribulations brought to the place, and then they decorated and moved and they evolved with, and the Aboriginals adapted and brought the story out of.
Yeah.
And so partly it was making up, and partly it was grabbing the artifice. So there's part of artifice and part of nature in here. It's that duality. I think there's a lot of duality and mixing, which we find difficult to do.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we can't, one of the things we struggle to accept is, we are everything and nothing at the same time. One of the things I like to mention with the beautiful ocean out the window here is that you are a drop in the ocean forgot about, and at the same time you're the most powerful creator that ever existed, ever. And you were those things at the same time. Yeah. And we struggle to deal with that. And I had a bit of a thought about technology actually with the ones and zeros, and the guy's name is slipping my mind, but the guy that created the Enigma machine, Turing, yeah. So all of our computers are now based on Turing's original computer. If you look into his work and his stuff, that he was already developing a better computer, and if he had not succumbed to the terrible end that he did succumb to, we would have a different brand of technology.
Well, you're going to think that I'm going way off here, but I have to tell you this.
There is no way off.
Great. This is good. All right, let me just talk then.
Yeah.
Okay, and how it comes back to Stonehenge.
Absolutely.
Or not.
Yeah.
Okay, I just have to get my thoughts in line, and it is, So we know about Turing.
Yep.
You've heard of Charles Babbage?
Yes.
Okay, so you know Charles Babbage's difference engine. Should I talk about the history of that, or do you think your audience knows?
Maybe talk. I'm aware of it. Talk a little bit about it, just to bring yourself to speed.
Right. So well before Turing in World War II, in the 1850s, there was a man called Charles Babbage, and he invented what some people claim to be the first computer.
Yes.
Before Turing.
Yeah.
His computer worked differently. His was a steam engine sort of thing.
That's right.
There was lots of gears that spun around.
Yes.
And when he first made it, the idea, the reason he made it. This is good. I could go about Ada Byron and programming, and I'll go into that if you want to. But what's important to tell you is this. Babbage, what happened with his life is when he was a teenager, his family was rich. His father was wealthy, and he said, you're upper class, you're the nouveau wealth, and I've got lots of money which you'll inherit. There's just one rule, you can't get a job. Because if you work, you're a commoner. So as long as you promise not to get a job, a decent job, I promise you to do what you want. I'm going to give you all the money. Now, Babbage decided to do this. Funny thing about Babbage, I won't go into it too long. But I will say that Babbage decided that he wanted to solve every problem on the planet. He thought, well, if I've got this lifetime of leisure, and I'm a smart guy, and Dad's given me free reign,
and you've got all the money,
I can have, what can I do? And he said, I know what I'll do with it. I will solve all mankind's ills. And he thought it over, and he thought, okay, what's the problem? Okay, we have war, and we have hatred and bloodshed. We've got to get rid of all that, and we have to have peace on Earth, and we have to have people sort of become better. I don't think evolution had yet come into play yet. 1859, Charles Darwin, that philosophy hadn't yet come out.
Yeah.
But the idea of having a superhuman had already come in to play with the ideas of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, and the first vampire stories. The idea that you make this super being. So Babbage decided, I'm going to for me to find the answer on how to cure the Earth. I can't get there because I'm not a Superman. That's my problem. I'm like everyone else.
Right.
So what he did with his family fortune was he invested it in himself, in taking himself into the biggest stresses he could imagine. He actually had himself lowered into Vesuvius, the volcano, in Italy, in a metal box. He organised people to do this. I don't know what you call the people who come with you. The people who live there.
Yep.
Guides.
Yep.
So the guides lowered him into the volcano to where you're meant to fry to death. Because he said to himself, if you put me, my mind and my body, and you lower me into a volcano, and I'm face my fear and my fear of death, and be put in that's going to make me a person who can think more freely.
Yes.
So for him to be a free thinker, he put himself in those situations, and it wasn't just a volcano. He spent his family fortune doing all that. The coldest place, the deepest place, the darkest place. He actually did that.
Just to test his mind.
Just to strengthen his mind and his body, to test it too, but just to make him into a being that's worthy to have the thought of what can solve the world's problems. So after putting him through this huge regime, starvation, whatever, at the end of it, after whatever a decade or